Alex Navarro, the weekend is over.
Why's the weekend got to be over, man? I want every day to be the weekend.
You know
Everyday
what?
weekend.
Yep, let's just run a poll in the chat. Should every day be a weekend?
The
The
answer is
uh,
yes.
the options are yes and yes.
And if you say no,
You're
fuck you,
banned
you're
from the
banned.
site. Don't
Fuck
get your
that
name
shit.
out. Get out of here.
Yeah. How was your weekend, Patrick? As you're sipping coffee, so I'll just talk for a second until you're done sipping coffee.
It was good.
Yeah.
The weather has taken a turn for the better out here in
Mm.
Chicago. It is actually even today. Well, it probably isn't right now, but it will be. When the sun gets up a little more. It's supposed to be in the low 60s. I didn't even have to wear a jacket yesterday. It was amazing.
Wow.
Incredible. My guess is today you could go to the beach and there would be people there.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine by Midwestern standards, the 60s, until it actually gets to be the summer, is probably something like a godsend. We've had basically the same thing here. It was warm for like a day because we had like a random rainstorm come through, and then it turned freezing, but kept raining all of a sudden. So now we're getting like weird wintry mix shit all of a sudden, and I'm not happy about that.
It's supposed to rain all week, which I'm actually psyched about.
If it
I
was just rain, that'd be great.
I love rain. It's a perfect excuse to sit inside and like play a game, like just like crack open a window, listen to the rain. Oh, thunderstorm would be even better. I
Yeah,
feel like an old man talking like that, but I do love me a thunderstorm.
me
What can
too.
I say?
We
Yeah,
got the kind of thunderstorm that straight up rumbled the apartment too. Like every time it was a thunderclap, like the place would shake because it
oh,
was like right overhead. That was great.
that's the best. Like my
Yeah.
ideal scenario there is to have a thunderstorm, have a little glass of nice whiskey, like sit outside of a door if it's warm enough, and smoke a cigar.
Mm.
Mm, that's like the best thing ever.
Didn't know you were a stogie man. Didn't know you were up for the cigar smoking.
Every once in a while, not
All right.
it's not a regular thing, but a good cigar every great once in a while uh, is uh, is a nice thing. I don't know anything about them. I need to
Yeah.
learn. I have
You're
a
no
humidor
aficionado.
that was given to me uh, for Christmas, but it's mostly just keeping in a bunch of cigars that I couldn't tell you the quality of between any of them. It's one of those things that I've been meaning to learn something about, but I probably need to just take like a class.
Yeah.
Probably that probably
Well,
seems like
here's
something you
here's
could do.
here's the one handy tip I was able to pick up over my years of occasionally smoking cigars.
Mm-hmm.
If you're able to buy it at a gas station, it's not very good.
Okay,
That is the
that's fair.
extent of my cigar wisdom. That is as far as it goes.
Cigar time with Alex Navarro.
Yeah.
Don't buy him at a
Don't buy
gas
gas
station.
station cigars or 7-Elevens. Those also.
Don't go to gas stations. Maybe just in
Well, I mean,
general.
sometimes you have to go to gas stations. I mean, if you have a car,
You could just siphon it yourself from the earth.
it's discouraged to do that. They generally want you to participate in this sort of consumer thing, to actually buy the gas from a retailer.
Wow, such a society conformist, Alex Navarro. I didn't know you had it in you.
I'm way too panicky and anxiety ridden to try and do things on my own. I have to conform to standards. That's the only way I can survive.
Fair enough. Did you play any video games this weekend?
I did. I played through another chunk of Infamous. I'm about 75% of the way through that game at this point. I will finish it because it is not very long. I will say that I'm a little. I'm not even gonna say I'm let down because I've had the same problem with this game as I've had with other Infamous games, which is say that I've never really cared about the stories at all. I
Yeah,
don't think,
because they're like bad comic book stories, not even good ones.
and this is better. I think this is like I'm inspired enough to finish this one, but there's not a lot going on there that I really care about. The whole plot line feels kind of contrived and not in a particularly fun way. Um, they do the pretty blatantly the audio log thing of this is how you collect the backstory, and I always find that
Mhm.
shit really annoying, especially when it's like really blatant. Um, but it is fun. The different abilities you get are cool. The upgrades for them feel meaningful, and they let you tackle battles different ways, which is nice. The open world is it's expansive enough for what that game needs to be, and it looks spectacular. So I've been enjoying what I've played of it. My total lack of emotional investment, notwithstanding, I've been having a good time with it. Probably not good enough to want to go back and play through it evil. There's a part of me that wants to, just because I have to imagine the contrivances they have to pull together to make you, as a total evil dirtbag, maintain some of those character relationships that you have to maintain throughout the game are pretty dumb. And I kind of want to see those a little bit, but not necessarily enough to want to play through the whole game again. I'm perfectly happy just going through, as a paragon of virtue through the entirety of it, and I'll be okay with it.
Well, I'll go ahead and promise you, when I play Infamous 2, probably at some point in the next month, I will go ahead and I will be that dick for you.
Excellent. Yeah,
I will report back on what the game has to do in order to bend over to make that happen. But I'm fine. I'm fine with being a jerk. I'll just dive right in.
Yeah, I think that probably suits your personality better. Not that I'm implying anything by that. But I would love to know what you come across with that, because the good guy story is fine. It's so milquetoast, and it's so just like unremarkable superhero storytelling. It's just kind of like all the weird, for all the shit that dude talked at E3, the guy who did that Sony demo where he was talking about the drones in the air and the surveillance culture and all that shit. It's like, yeah, that's there, but it's just window dressing. Like all other video games that try to tackle issues on any level, it's just fucking window dressing. It's like, here, we just made Seattle look all fucking militarized, and now you can go blow that up. And, I don't know. I guess maybe for all the melodrama that he delivered that speech with, I was kind of hoping that there would be a little more to it. But honestly, my enjoyment from that game came purely from just the visual spectacle and just being able to run around and blast fools with neon, Yeah,
it's you're definitely seeing a pattern of a lot of games these days wanting to act as social commentary.
Yeah.
And it's getting hard to tell when that is sincere or if that is just piggybacking on, is it going to be a biting critique as social commentary, or is it just going to be window dressing and setting because that happens to be part of the conversation, right? So it seems like with Infamous Second Son, it's more that, we as a culture are having a broader conversation about, the rules of a surveillance state and drones and, wiretapping and things like that. So Infamous incorporates those, but it doesn't seem like it's necessarily, making, like I said, a biting critique of the NSA or societal attitudes towards sort of a surveillance culture.
No, not at all. At best, it is a sort of bad play on some of the more militaristic elements of like X-Men or whatever, where the government would step in with their anti-mutant agencies or whatever. It's fine. Like it tells the story it needs to tell. It makes the character. I will say the character is not as big of a douchebag as I thought he would be, and maybe that's just because I'm not playing him as an uber dick. But he every piece of promotion I ever saw with Delson, the lead character, kind of made me want to punch him. Throughout most of the game thus far, I have not really wanted to hit him at all. Like, he's a little smarmy and shitty at times, but not so overbearing that you can't deal with him. And it's in very short spurts. He's never he's never a sustained asshole. He's just sort of like occasionally a dick. So I don't know. I'm finding it enjoyable. I think it is. I think that once that system gets a few more big games on it, it is not a game that will last in people's memories for long, past its play point. I think it is definitely benefiting from the fact that it is one of the few big original games on that system right now.
It certainly feels like it's probably time for Sucker Punch to move on from Infamous. Having not played the latest one, it does seem like maybe the well is getting a little dry on this specific take that they have. And I guess that's actually partially, again, having not played it, but, even just, looking at it in the run-up, was a little more disappointed that when they chose to not just make it Infamous 3 and be a direct continuation of what had come before, that maybe they take a few more risks with the gameplay and the setup. It seems like that necessarily hasn't really happened in Second Son.
No, it's. I don't know. Like I said, it's one of those things where it's like, getting the different powers, like being able to, throw different types of blast energy at people is cool, and I like that there's that variety. And the open world stuff is well done. Like, it is fun to wander around there. I kept running into different things every section that I would walk into. There would always be some camera I wanted to go blow up, or some drug bust to go break up. But honestly, like, it does things well and it looks really good, but it doesn't do anything that other open world games haven't done a dozen times before. It just feels like a tightly focused version of a million other open world games, and it's fun. It's a good time. I would certainly recommend it, but I'm definitely ready for I think you're right. I think it is maybe time for Sucker Punch to move on, but they probably won't, because I imagine this is their most successful franchise at this point. This is the thing that they are going to be making for the foreseeable future.
It just seems like I've really enjoyed the open world in all of the Infamous games, even when the story and the characters are just like, it might as well just delete them. Like, they just weren't really doing a whole lot for me. But I love the powers. I love climbing around the environment. I like the way Sucker Punch builds open worlds, and I like the way that you interact with them. Like, I like the verticality. It's not quite Crackdown or Saints Row 4, where you're just completely breaking the physics of the world, so you can kind of just leap across it. But like, it's got a very it's in terms of turning Sly Cooper into an open world game, you wouldn't be able to do that with the setting that they have. But they essentially do that with Infamous, and they seem to have wildly succeeded. I would just love to see them, maybe do a little more shifts in some other directions to make that a little more interesting and compelling. Because it's, they're getting the gameplay systems right. Yeah. It's just everything else they could use a little help with, it seems like.
Yeah, they probably just need some. I don't know. I'm not saying they don't have writing talent, but I think that they definitely need someone else looking at those scripts and trying to punch them up in a way that is more interesting. Because I've just never cared about the characters in any of those games. It's why I stopped playing 2 and why I never finished 1. I just wasn't involved enough to want to, like you said, the open worlds were fun and the stuff I was doing was fun, but I just never cared enough to finish them. I'll finish this one because there's just enough of a lull in games forthcoming. For me to take the time to finish it, and especially if I only got like 25% left of it to do. But I think that is not as this is probably my favorite game in the series. It still does not rank very highly on the scope of like third-person action games or open world games, as far as ones I've played over the years.
That's fair. Well, I'm looking forward to playing it. I'm slowly but surely. I think I'm in the last third, maybe last fourth, maybe last fifth. I'm not totally sure. I haven't looked at a fact to be sure, but I'm in the final sprint of Dark Souls 2. Yeah. It really feels like I am heading towards the end game of that. I probably have, I don't know, 3 or 4 sections left, which is probably equates to maybe 5 to 10 hours of gameplay. But I'm definitely on the home stretch of Dark Souls 2, which feels, I'm very excited about that. That has been a deep sprint in the last 2 weeks, but and one that has been mighty frustrating at times. But it is always satisfying to move forward in that game, and I feel like I'm towards the end.
Yeah. So you also spent some time this weekend playing other games other than Dark Souls, did you not?
I did. Yeah. I made a conscious effort, both because I wanted other things to talk about, and because you don't play Dark Souls. Right. It's sort of tough to talk about Dark Souls to yourself. So I first on Saturday I purchased and downloaded Ground Zeroes.
Right.
For the PlayStation 4 because it seemed like it was the best version, 6 frames a second, 1080p, and yeah, So if you looked at my tweets, obviously, I was not particularly enthralled with Ground Zeroes, and I feel that way sort of regardless of some of the weird, gross twists that happen in the story and how it uses some of the characters. I could not get into the gameplay flow, which I was pretty disappointed about, mostly because I think there's a lot of really good fundamental changes. I think open world suits Metal Gear really, really well. I think the tight corridors that you would often find yourself in the previous Metal Gear games meant that that's what led to, when you were caught, waiting through the alert state and things like that, you might as well have just killed yourself and started over at the last checkpoint, because it just wasn't worth it. Like, the game just didn't give you enough tools when it came to dealing with being caught to make it worthwhile. At least, that's kind of how I felt when I played. And by giving you an open world, which gives you places to hide, places to go, and other things to do while you're waiting for that alert state to come back down, I think is a fundamental shift that makes just the base gameplay of Metal Gear much more enjoyable. There's also lots of small tweaks. Like, I love the fact that when you get caught, the game goes into slow motion for like 5-6 seconds, so you can all of a sudden, if a guy catches you, you can pull off like a tranquilizer shot to the head and knock him to sleep, and you don't have to go into the alert state. So the game has built. It seems like the game is very much understanding that, hey, we need to find ways to empower the player, even though it's a stealth game. So how do you find ways to empower the player without making it totally sort of a power fantasy, even though it's supposed to be a game where Snake is powerful, but is at the mercy of being outnumbered by a lot of people.
Right. So I am not the biggest Metal Gear fan. I have always found Kojima's sensibilities just don't terribly line up with my own. I find those stories to be way overwrought and crazy in a way that I have not terribly enjoyed. But I've also found that they tended to be more ridiculous than sort of just straight up awful. Like, there was always at least something I could find amusement in a lot of those other MGS games, the ones I played anyway. This one sounds like it kind of goes for a more just straight up gritty, dare I say grotesque kind of sensibility with some of its storytelling as well, that perhaps also still kind of borders on the absurd while still being sort of grotesque. You talked a little bit about it on Twitter, the ending, which I don't think we need to straight up spoil here right now, though I'm sure plenty of people have done that in the forums already. But
yeah, people in the chat should be careful. Like, yeah, I imagine people will be hinting at or explicitly saying as we bring it up. And yeah, I don't think we need to necessarily get into those particulars right now, especially because the game just came out and people maybe haven't played it yet. But when you look at the public statements that Hideo Kojima has said over the years, like, he very much has wanted to move on from the Metal Gear franchise. That's a good way to generate headlines every time a creator says they want to leave the franchise that has come to define their primary work. So Kojima certainly comes across as one that would be smart at manipulating the press by making such statements, but if we take them at face value, that he truly does want to leave the Metal Gear franchise and make something new. There was a Eurogamer profile I read recently where he mentioned that as much as he has a desire to leave, in terms of getting resources to make what he wants to make, if he just says it's a Metal Gear game, it basically just gets approved. So you can see why that is a really tempting solution to your creative desires. It's like, well, okay, you don't want to keep working within the Metal Gear universe, but you want to make something else. But you can make whatever you want and get whatever resources you want if you make it within Metal Gear. I think that's why you see him making statements like he doesn't care if Ground Zeroes breaks the mythology or if he has to kind of screw with it in order to fit whatever story he wants to tell.
Right.
Because I think at this point, like, the Metal Gear franchise is buckling under his desire to make something new, and that franchise's ability to support what he wants to do there. And Ground Zeroes, I think, is at the epicenter of that. I think the ending, the way he uses certain characters, is this very natural desire that as one gets older, you start thinking about your legacy. You want to do things that are important. You want to be remembered, and you tend to do that through whatever creative outlet that you have. He has games. I have writing, and it feels like these subjects are being brought into Metal Gear, a game that has a character whose main villain is Skullface, a dude who looks like Freddy Krueger. And then if you read up on the things this character does, yes, it does make you hate a dude named Skullface. Yes, it does make him seem like a horrible, horrible human being. But he's a guy named Skullface.
Right.
And it just doesn't fit Metal Gear at all. And it feels like it's not a good... It's not employed very well and doesn't fit Metal Gear at all. And I think that's what leads to a lot of this like weird anxiety and hand-wringing over it, both from people who really love this franchise and want, Hideo Kojima to do whatever he wants with it, and he should. I mean, look, like Kojima is free to create whatever he wants to create. I would never say that the man should censor himself just because I don't particularly care for some of the things that he's doing, but I also have the right to tell him I think he's doing a bad job at it.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel about this, is where some of the sexual content of Ground Zeroes, let's say, it just doesn't work. Like, he doesn't handle it with a deft touch. Like, it feels very brute force, like, let's make this game serious and dark, and it doesn't work for me. Like, it just does not work at all. Like, it really feels like he's trying too hard.
Yeah, and I mean, this is to hammer that point. Like, this is a bit, the ending and just some of the surrounding stuff in the game around it. Like, before that game even came out, I had people who played it call me up just to tell me about it because they needed someone to talk to about it, because they weren't sure what to even do with the information that they had just processed. I'm not even like known as a Metal Gear fan or even terribly interested in that series amongst anyone that I know. But, like, it's one of the, like, it came across, I guess, to some of my friends as just so, completely out there and not well done that they needed someone to just talk about it with because they had nowhere else to turn to it. And, as it was described to me, I was just sitting there going, this is going to go over so badly. This is going to go over so badly. And honestly, it hasn't gone over as badly as I thought it would. Like, I've been reading the reactions from people. I've been reading, some of the reviews and other pieces on the game. And yeah, there are definitely people who take umbrage with the way that material is handled in that game. And I certainly think I would if I played it as well. But it does seem like there are a lot of people that are also just kind of brushing this off as just, oh, whatever, it's just taking a different tone, but it's just Kojima being Kojima. And I don't know. I mean, from what it's like you said, from what I've played of the MGS series, and I've played a few of the games, as dark as MGS gets, is still usually pretty campy and over the top. Like, even when there are like scenes of torture or deep character brooding moments or whatever else, it's usually punctuated with a giant fucking robot ninja coming in and fucking slashing shit up, or other just absolutely absurd things happening. And it doesn't seem like Ground Zeroes really tries to undercut that very much with much ridiculousness at all. Would you say that was true of your experience playing it or not?
Yeah, and I think there's a very different context for how the player experiences what we're talking about here. Like, the Metal Gear franchise does have a history of the game has referenced or characters have experienced sexual assault, sexual violence in the series before. It is not completely new territory for Metal Gear. But the big difference, the huge difference here, is that it's either implied, mentioned in a piece of dialogue, or found as part of some backstory. What's different in Ground Zeroes is that it's part of audio tapes, and you have to listen to it.
Yeah.
And it's a creative choice to include it as an audio tape. It's a creative choice to make these characters do these things. Metal Gear is not historical fact. Metal Gear is not historical record. You can make the argument that, yes, horrible things like what the character Skullface does do, or is implied to do in Ground Zeroes, has been done in war before. I'm not going to make the argument that war isn't horrible and people haven't done equally, if not worse, things in war. But Metal Gear isn't history,
right?
And so it's Hideo Kojima making specific choices to include these things. And so why does someone include those things? The reason they include those things, the way you experience those things, I think are important, because those are the creative choices that we can judge and analyze. And I think it's quite another in Ground Zeroes to have you collecting audio logs and hearing these things occur.
Yeah.
And I think that is what leads the game to lose its B-movie campiness. That it just does not fit tonally. I don't think Kojima pulls it off. It's not that these subjects shouldn't be a part of video games, or that even in a goofy game can still make a point, right? Like, I mean, that can be its own context, is like you're not taking it seriously because of the series' own history, and it uses that in a complex way to make a point. If that was Kojima's intention, I think he fails miserably to do so. So it's not, indicting his decision to do this. It's not indicting his decision to employ this in order to elicit a feeling from the player. It's how he does it, and
Right.
I think it doesn't work at all. I think it's completely tonally out there, and he made the choice to do it, and I'm not going to feel bad for critiquing him, which is, I feel like, so part of the problem, like when you talk about Metal Gear, like, it's the one franchise where I make any comment about it, and man, there are just some really, really, let's call them passionate fans
Yes, that's one way to
that come out at you. And so what's really tough about it is that, like, those people don't represent every Metal Gear fan. They probably don't represent majority of Metal Gear fans, and yet those people tend to dominate the conversation because they are the loudest. They are shouting, and it's very easy to focus on them. Like, I retweeted one of the more horrible remarks that someone leveraged at me over the weekend, and it's so easy to then think about how I would just write an article just screaming at those people. But I don't want to do that. I think that most Metal Gear fans are grown up to have an adult conversation about, what context is, that you can have an idea and it doesn't creatively get pulled off. And what does this mean for the Phantom Pain, and what Kojima's sort of general narrative thrust is going to be for sort of his career in the future. But yeah, it's really hard to sometimes have that conversation around this franchise.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, he has his very passionate defenders, and I mean, for my part, there are pieces of MGS I have liked over the years. He is just not a designer or an artist that I find tends to line up with my own personal sensibilities. That doesn't mean I think the games are all bullshit or anything. It just means that they're not for me. In this context, though, it sounds like you have more of a general fondness for MGS, and I'm curious, like, having played Ground Zeroes now, what does that do for your interest level in Phantom Pain now?
I have to see what happens. Would be my initial response. And I do like some of the gameplay changes in Ground Zeroes. Like, I intend to play Ground Zeroes again if I intend to go forward with writing anything about the game. It's so short that it's easy to imagine I just didn't spend enough time to get into the flow of the gameplay, that it takes longer than, the 60 minutes that I spent with it in order to really kind of understand how all the systems interact. So, I'm not willing to completely dismiss it on a gameplay level yet, especially considering I like a lot of the changes. I just couldn't. It just wasn't quite clicking for me for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, I've loved the cheesy, over-the-top nature of that franchise. I adore how much the game reflects Hideo Kojima's like crazy. I love Hollywood. It's an Eastern-Western fusion that is just so reflective of his own personal taste that the reasons I dislike some of the choices he makes when it comes to like long cutscenes and stuff like that are absolutely the reasons I love that the franchise exists, because there just aren't that many people that get to purely make exactly what they want to make, and it seems like he gets to do that, even if that's at odds with, wanting to create completely new things. The Metal Gear franchise is Hideo Kojima, and that's what I find fascinating about it, because I feel like you learn something about him when you play these games, and that's just not true of a lot of AAA big-budget video games. You don't get a lot of personality in those games, and you get that in Metal Gear, and that's what I find fascinating about it, because I feel like I'm doing research about a designer while playing the games.
Yeah, yeah, and I'll give him credit for that. That is definitely one of the series for many many years that has always felt like it retained a piece of him through each installment. Though again, I don't think his sensibilities line up with my own.
Sure.
I will probably never play Ground Zeroes, and I will probably not play the Phantom Pain. Just again, that series is just not something I've been able to get into. But it's interesting hearing your commentary on it, and I do hope you actually do end up writing something about that because I would like to read it.
Yeah, I would recommend. I'm still figuring out what, if anything, I have to say about it, and I'll probably play through it again before I'm moving that direction. But Jeremy Parrish, who is a big fan of that series, he wrote an excellent piece over at, is it US Gamer or Us Gamer?
I think it's US Gamer.
That speaks on similar subjects and goes into depth about the tone of the Metal Gear franchise, where we've had other examples in different media where they decide to tackle serious subjects. He talks a lot about Watchmen, which is, about superheroes, but touches on a lot of very dark subjects.
Right.
In fact, a lot of the same ones that the Ground Zeroes does. And he talks about how Watchmen is able to pull it off, how Ground Zeroes doesn't, and I think it's a very interesting analysis that, as I was thinking that maybe I should write something, I read that and went, maybe someone already said everything I have to say.
Right,
but,
right.
We'll have to see, but I do really recommend people check out his piece. It's very balanced. It comes from a perspective of someone that does like the games and trying to figure out what does and doesn't work about the tone of Ground Zeroes and the execution of some of its more dark imagery that it brings to the table. So that was that. I played Ground Zeroes, and then I played 2 hours of BioShock Infinite Burial at Sea Part 2.
Okay.
The conclusion to the BioShock saga.
Yes.
And it's really good.
Okay. I started in the first episode and didn't get very far into it. I still need to finish it. I found it a little bit, I don't know, sluggish, at least at the outset, and I kind of lost interest early on, but I need to go back to it. What is the fundamental thing about episode 2 for you that is the best? Like, what's the best thing so far about playing that episode?
They turn it into Dishonored.
Okay. All right. Now you have my interest. Go on.
It's Burial at Sea Part 2 is a stealth game. They not only give you control over Elizabeth, that she is now your player character, but they fundamentally upend the mechanics of BioShock. Whereas, in Burial at Sea Part 1, it was taking the mechanics and the evolution and the iteration on combat in BioShock Infinite and applying that to Rapture, which felt a little ham-fisted, like the fact that they, you still have the Skyhook equivalents, and I realized narratively why there were the parallels and blah, 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 but it just felt a little like, okay, all right, well, it doesn't totally work. But in Part 2, they narratively have a reason for them to completely change the gameplay. Like, they could just make Elizabeth a powerful badass, and it probably would have been fine. But instead, they set it up with, hey, you can choose to participate in the violence that has been very much part of BioShock Infinite and was very much a large criticism of BioShock Infinite in terms of the way it glorified that violence. And in Burial at Sea Part 2, they give you an opportunity to kind of choose. They definitely give you a lot of options with stealth, and that seems to be what they're trying to encourage you to go towards. But you can, you have access to guns and things like that, so you can do that. But it really seems like the guns are a last resort. For example, you can no longer kill the Big Daddies. That is not an option. The game just upfront is like, Elizabeth is not going to be able to pull it off. She does not have access to the same high-powered vigors and things like that. So you can manipulate the Big Daddy, you can possess it so that he'll attack the enemies in the area, or you can manipulate the other splicers in order to them to attack the Big Daddy, so you can kind of run through an area. But they give you a lot of new gameplay options that basically allow you to toy with the AI. So you'll have something called a noisemaker, which is attached to a crossbow, and that just creates, you shoot that out, and that creates noise over in the corner. So everyone heads over there, and then you can run through. Or you can set the noisemaker, which is what I've been doing this tactic. You shoot the noisemaker off into the corner, and then you can switch to a different ammunition for your crossbow, which is a gas bomb, and then that knocks everyone out. So you attract everyone to a corner, they're all lumped together, poof, throw out this gas bomb, boom, and then they're all gone. And then the entire room is taken care of with relative ease. And the DLC is all about that. Like you can jump up into a skyhook equivalent, and then when you jump off, you can no longer attack people on the way down, but you can jump behind them, and if you hold B, the character will, or Elizabeth will crouch, and she won't make any noise. So you can use that to get like really quickly get around the environment, get behind someone, whack them on the head, and kind of stealth your way across the world. But it's just a different way to play BioShock. Some things don't really work, but I really love the fact that they tried something so dramatically different in a piece of DLC.
Yeah, it's cool that they, would fundamentally change the way you approach the game. And I remember when I talked to Ken Levine, some months before the first episode even came out, he was very adamant that the second episode was going to be, a very vastly different experience. And just in talking to him, it seemed like he was a lot more excited about that episode. Not just because you'd be able to play as Elizabeth, but just for like some of the gameplay ideas they had. And I get the impression that some of that stuff probably came from him actually playing Dishonored once he got done with, Infinite getting ready to ship. I remember that was one of the games he talked about playing and wanting to get into as soon as that game wrapped on development. So it's not surprising that he would implement some of the stuff in there that he might have found in a game like Dishonored. But that sounds cool. That sounds like something I would want to play, because the core shooty stuff in BioShock Infinite was definitely not my favorite aspect of that game. I've said many times before that I thought it was just the gunplay never really jived with anything else. So the way you're describing this, and the way it sounds like you play as Elizabeth in that episode, sounds like something I would enjoy a lot more. Yeah,
and it really does feel like they're addressing a lot of the criticisms in BioShock Infinite in this DLC. And I'm not going to get into the story stuff. I don't want to spoil that for anyone, because DLC just came out as well. But to see them be able to make this many changes and try this many new ideas, implement them as fast as they did in Burial at Sea Part 2, it makes me pretty bummed that studio is gone now, because it really does feel like the amount of time they were spending building these games was directly at odds with the talent of a team to actually pull off new ideas very quickly. And you see this in Burial at Sea Part 2, where it's just like, oh, in some ways this is an alternate universe, which lines up narratively with BioShock Infinite, where this studio is given a chance to make things more quickly and take some risks and get a little weird, and like they sort of fundamentally break the game in some ways with this one, where like one of the new powers you get access to is something called a peeping Tom, which is found in a porn shop equivalent in BioShock, or in Rapture, which is pretty great. And if you are standing still and you tap it, you can see the enemies around you. It kind of turns into a temporary radar. And then if you hold it down, you can no enemies are going to see you. So basically, you can choose to engage with the world, or there is a way to use a noisemaker and then just walk through an entire room without having to engage with the combat. But you know what? It's nice to have options, and that's what I really like about it, is it gives the player more options than they had in BioShock Infinite. It allows the player to choose whether they want to go down the bloodthirsty route, because you totally can. There's plenty of ammunition that you can just take everyone out the normal way you take people out in BioShock. But I have found it fun, at least in the first hour or two, to engage with the stealth stuff. And yeah, it feels like Dishonored. Maybe that's me projecting a little bit, but I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that sounds A-okay by me, and that sounds like something I would enjoy playing. So now I actually have to finish episode 1, damn it. But I'll do that eventually.
I've heard people are so angry about how Burial at Sea ends that I have to know.
Yeah, you're not at the end yet, right? You still got a little bit to go.
No, apparently this is a little bit bigger than the last episode, but I don't know to what degree. I'm in the middle of collecting some things, and I've collected 2 of them. So I don't know how much further I have to go once I've done that. But there's sort of an upgrade tree, but the upgrade tree is you finding things in the world, and I have not found very many of those. So either I'm not looking close enough, or I probably have another 2 hours to go. But I've heard there is kind of like a long walking down corridors narrative sequence that is like an hour long towards the end. So I think I probably have a little bit more to go at least.
Okay. Yeah, I'm curious to see how you feel about it once you get to that ending. I didn't really get a chance to play much else. I had intended to try out the Galactic Civilizations 3 alpha when that came out, but I realized that the state that game is in right now is really only playable for people who automatically know how to play GalCiv already. There's no tutorial built in yet. There's really nothing that would teach you how to play it at all. So I took someone's suggestion that someone sent me, and I downloaded GalCiv 2 just because I want to try that out and see how it is. I have not had a chance to play it yet, but I have it now installed, and I'm going to try messing around with that for a little bit until GalCiv 3 is actually in a playable state.
I'm looking forward to hearing what Alex Navarro has to say about the GalCiv series. I'm really looking forward to this.
I mean, as someone who likes the Civilization games, I don't get the impression that these games are that much more complicated than Civilization. I mean, I imagine there are some more complexities to it, but I don't know. Everything I've read about the series in preparing for this makes me interested and think that it would be something I would really like. So I'm going to see how I like GalCiv 2.
So let's see. There's a little bit of news over the weekend. Alien Isolation has a release date of October 7th. I actually played that at GDC.
How was it?
It's good.
Are you allowed to talk about it yet? Is there still an embargo for that? Okay.
I'm definitely allowed to talk about it.
Okay, that's good.
But you definitely can see the amnesia influence in the game. Let's start. First things first. It's unbelievably good looking. Like, holy crap! Like, looks so goddamn incredible. Like, the art is just the high-resiest 70s spaceships you have ever seen in a video game, and it is so cool to look around that environment, and just it really does feel like you are walking around. Was the Nostromo?
Yeah.
Was the ship from Alien? And yeah, it just, I spent like a good 15 minutes just doing that. Was just like peeking around, looking at things. Like it looks fantastic. And then pretty quickly you get into a sequence involved with trying to escape from the xenomorph. There's only one, or at least it appears there's only one. They're trying to sort of kind of take that formula from the original film and turn that into a game. And it runs into a similar problem that games like this have, in which that first encounter is utterly terrifying, and then when you die, it's not nearly as scary on the 6th or 7th time trying to make it through that sequence, which is sort of always the tough part, design-wise for these games. Is the ideal scenario is probably that the player just barely makes it out alive on their first time through, so they get all the tension and the surprise that the designers have put in there, but without the frustration of having to really break down the design to figure out like how the AI works. So I spent a lot of time doing that. It took me like 9 or 10 times to just make it through the sequence, and it was like as simple as I should have gone left instead of right. But the moments when it does work, and I caveat a lot of this because it's a sliced sequence out of the game. I think it's like 2 different sequences from 2 different parts of the game, and you're doing it at this press thing. Like, it's not the ideal scenario. Horror games do not demo well, so it's you kind of have to take this stuff with a bit of a grain of salt. But the parts where it did work were fantastic, and I am very excited to see what else they do with it. I didn't get any sense of what the crafting system is. I was collecting things that I could presumably use to make stuff in the game, but I don't know exactly what that means. The alien kills you so fast, I cannot imagine any of that's going to involve injuring the alien, but maybe you can imagine a scenario where, like, if you got access to a gun, you'd be able to like scare it away. at the very most. I don't know. They didn't get into any of that sort of stuff. When I showed up at the event, I had somewhere to be like pretty quickly, so I wasn't sure I was actually going to be able to stick around. So like there was a big presentation, like an hour-long presentation that I skipped and didn't go to, and I showed up like just before they're about to finish, and the PR person is like, if you go to the other end of the room, you'll be first in line to go play the game. So that I was the jerk who didn't take a seat for their presentation, slinked all the way to the left, and they're like, well, please head over to our hands-on area. And, of course, I was the first one able to walk in the door.
Sneaky scoop, sneaky.
The PR person told me to do it. I feel like I'm exonerated. But I did feel kind of a jerk doing it. But, yeah, so it was like a 20-minute demo. It took maybe 30 minutes to play, and it seems very promising. We'll have to see how that pans out, but I'm very excited to see where they go with it. They have nailed the look. They've got the right approach. You know, it's just a matter of pulling it off, which is certainly the hard part, but I'm optimistic, I guess I would say.
That's good. That's good to hear. I mean, let's face it, the Alien franchise has not exactly had a great run of late, and you know, I mean, everything of this game that they've shown has they've said the right things every single time, but at the same time, Gearbox said a lot of the right things throughout their promotion of that game, and I realized two different studios, two different approaches, very different things. There is still a part of me that feels burned inside, deep in my soul, so I'm trying to remain skeptical until I hear from people who have actually played a significant portion of that product that it is actually good. Though what you have said here at least encourages me a bit.
Yeah, I think people should be rightfully skeptical about a new Alien game, especially one produced by Sega after the last debacle. And, you know, if that means you waiting until the game is out and people are playing it, I think that is the right approach. I think that's usually the right approach with most games, is to let other people take the hit before you shell out your money for it. But, you know, this franchise is deep in the hole. There's reason to think that this one could demo promising because, you know what? So did Colonial Marines. And there's every reason to think that, you know, or to be cynical and skeptical that this one is not going to work, not to mention that Creative Assembly has never made anything resembling a game like this. They are known as a strategy developer, so delving into the shooter not shooter, but first person is something new for them. Doesn't mean they can't do it, but given everything that we've had to deal with, the trauma that is being part of a fan of the Alien franchise and what we've had to go through on the movie side and on the game side, there's reason to not have much hope.
Yeah, totally. I don't think there was that much else new. There was something. John Carmack commented on the Facebook stuff, did he not?
He did. There was one of the artists in Anamanaguchi, Peter Berkman. Anamanaguchi is the chiptune band. In his Tumblr blog, John Carmack actually responded. Let's see. I have it pulled up here. I'm not going to read the whole statement, but let's see. He says, honestly, I wasn't expecting Facebook or this soon. I have zero personal background with them, and I think other companies would have more obvious synergies. However, I do have reasons to believe that they get the big picture as I see it, and will be a powerful force towards making it happen. You don't make a commitment like they just did on a whim. I wasn't personally involved in any of the negotiations. I spent an afternoon talking technology with Mark Zuckerberg, and the next week I found out that he bought Oculus.
Yeah. It's not. I mean, that plays to what, you know, we had heard before and what has been going around, that deal was pretty much an overnight thing, more or less.
You know, actually, this comment I think is actually way more interesting. It says there is a case to be made for being like Valve and trying to build a new VR ecosystem like Steam from the ground up. This is probably what most of the passionate fans wanted to see. The difference is that for years the industry thought Valve was nuts and they had the field to themselves. Valve deserves all their success for having the vision and perseverance to see it through to the current state. VR won't be like that. The experience is too obviously powerful, and it makes converts on contact. The fairly rapid involvement of the Titans is inevitable, and the real questions were how deeply to partner and with who. And I think he makes a really fair point there, that the idea, and that's why I made the comparison to Pebble when I wrote my article weighing in on this and the reaction was that this is all going to get complicated and have a lot of people deeply invested very, very quickly. Whereas Steam was something that Valve was able to spend, at this point, a whole decade getting right because other people didn't want to get involved, didn't want to build that, didn't think it was worth it, were happy with the existing system. VR is not going to be that way. There's going to be a lot of money from big people like Sony trying to get a slice of that as quickly as possible. And I think Carmack's point is to say, if we wanted to be one of those big players, they needed to partner with someone, and it was a matter of picking the right partner.
Right. And in this case, this is the partner that came around with the most money and seemingly the most upside, at least according to the people who were involved in investing in that company and the people above him. For his part, he doesn't sound like he's particularly bothered by it, and but that's also sort of not really been John Carmack's way over the years. It's he's a head down on the technology kind of guy. He doesn't really care who's signing his checks as long as they allow him to do fill out the creative vision that he has. So if nothing else, this seems like this is just a reiteration that he is not terribly concerned about this deal, at least not at this stage. And he still feels like Oculus is going to be able to do what it wants to do, just with greater funding and infrastructure now, which is great. And as we were talking about before the show started, I think it's super great that he is going around just making statements like this on people's fucking blogs because he doesn't care. He doesn't think about it as like a press statement. He's just like, no, I'm just gonna go comment on people's stuff because I can. Yeah, I think that is so great.
It's fantastic. Like that's, thank you, John Carmack.
Yeah.
Thank you for being you. And then, Oculus also picked up the head of Valve's R&D, Michael Abrash, who is the one who, as that implies, was had worked on Valve's VR system, but Valve had publicly said that they didn't have any intentions of releasing it or putting it to market. It was mostly made for them to better understand what VR is and what it was capable of, and how Steam might better support things like VR and Oculus down the line. So I think Abrash leaving is a pretty clear sign that Valve is getting out of that and really, really has no interest in mass producing its own VR device. But that's a big pickup for Oculus, and certainly seems to suggest that they're going to be attracting a lot of really top talent when they make a go at this, whatever that go might be.
Yeah, and I mean I think Superannuation was talking on Twitter the other day that there were multiple id people that had followed Carmack over there as well. So they are, they're building a pretty significant team over there.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting one way or the other how all that stuff pans out. Let's see if there are any questions in here before we bring this to a close. Doesn't seem like I've got any in the queue, but I also didn't ask for any, so that's what I get. What are you up to this week?
Let's see. Well, I mean, just for my own purposes, I'm going to finish Infamous here at some point and just get that done and over with. And beyond that, I think it's just going to be kind of getting prepared. Well, the Power Bombcast will air again this week. We'll be recording that on Wednesday with the usual crew, pre-WrestleMania hype. But other than that, just kind
weekend?
That is this coming Sunday, yes. Okay. That is Sunday night. So I will be attempting to watch that via the WWE Network. We'll see if the streaming holds up or not. But beyond that, just kind of getting ready for that and for PAX and for other things coming up. Not a lot of games coming out for review this week, though Goat Simulator is out this week, which I will most certainly be playing. That will happen.
Yeah, it sounds like that game is some really good fun. I'm definitely curious to see how that expanded beyond the joke.
Yeah.
Oh, look, we have some breaking news.
Breaking news.
Phil Spencer to take over as head of Xbox division.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. So the head of Microsoft Studios, but now he will lead all of the Xbox business, which includes Xbox Live, Xbox Music, and Xbox Video. That seems like the right choice. Yeah. Phil Spencer seems like a smart dude. A smart dude would be like him, who says on Twitter that he wants to come on our E3 show, which we will, of course, try to make happen.
Oh, of course.
If we could actually get Phil Spencer to do that. That sounds pretty great.
For sure. What do you got coming up this week?
Well, I'm going to mull that Metal Gear stuff. I'm working on a larger piece about clones, building on what happened with the game 3s and 2048 and 1024. I've been doing some digging into that, which I will not disclose. But I'm looking into trying to do something a little more substantial with that, given that it's, I think, the most high-profile instance we have seen that isn't like Flappy Bird, where the developer removed the game and then there was a flood of clones to try and take that market because it, the original game no longer existed. Threes is an example of a game where another game is siphoning its potential market value while that game is still on the market,
right?
In a pretty blatant way. So maybe that's something we can talk about on Friday when I've had a little more of a chance to dig into that. I'm hoping to file a big piece on that this week, but it sort of depends on how some other pieces of reporting come together in the meantime. So we're working on that. I'll think about Metal Gear and see if that's something I can't pull together this week as well. I took last week off from worrying about PAX East, but now I'll have to worry about PAX East this week because I'm giving a talk with Zoe Quinn of Depression Quest, and so I need to start figuring out what exactly I'm going to say for 20 minutes. So yeah. I should probably think about that a little bit, maybe.
Makes sense. Yeah, that's probably a good plan.
And then some people are asking, the Binding of Isaac feature is now dead. If I have thought about what I'm going to do next, I don't know. I'm going to take at least the next 2 weeks off. There won't be anything this week or next week because I need to spend that time, A, working on some of these features I mentioned, and B, starting to work on my talk for PAX East. So that'll be kind of eaten up by time that I would spend on a daily video. But I'm not opposed to doing another one. It does take up a significant portion of my time, and we probably wouldn't do it daily. We'd probably do it maybe 3 times a week going forward. But I'm certainly open to suggestions if people have ideas of games that they think might make sense. I actually really want to return to Spelunky because I haven't played the original Spelunky, the original game. And I would love to see if any of my skills transfer over to that. So maybe that's something we can do for funsies sometime this week or next week. So
that would be an interesting experiment. I would love to watch that.
We'll see. But that's about it. That's all I can think of right now. We'll have to see how the rest of the week pans out. But Alex, I will talk to you on Friday.
Oh.